So, hi everybody. I am so thrilled and delighted to be here with Gary Evans again, who is the director of the Forest Bathing Institute in the UK. And those of you who follow our work will probably remember that I spoke to Gary back in August of 2021. And I have no idea where the time's gone because we're almost 2 years later. But Gary, welcome. I know that your entire organization has been working tirelessly, and I know you've got exciting things to share. So please, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, well, it's great to be back. So there's been a huge amount of activity since we last spoke. And it's been really heartwarming to have a lot of responses from the people that watched our interview. I've lost track of the amount of interviews we've done, but it's somewhere in the region of 300 at this point. I mean, it's just a constant kind of interview cycle that we're doing. We just booked in something with Will Young,
Fantastic.
Yes. Idol. He's got a wellbeing podcast, but I think out of all of the interviews we've done, the reception and the incoming emails we've received from the interview we did together has been really inspiring.
I'm thrilled. We have an amazing support base of people who are aligned with nature, passionate about nature, and passionate about the interaction of us humans in nature. So yeah, we're a great fit.
But you also have, I now know, a lot of very influential people and a lot of very caring people in the professional healthcare circles. So I've had a huge number of interactions with different people that have reached out. So it would be great to be able to update everybody on what we're doing because we're running lots of pilots with the plan of scaling it all up. So of course it needs lots of people to make that happen. I could talk to you at length about how complicated the network needs to be to run sessions for those most in need.
But Gary, you only have to think about the network in a forest, and it's the same thing, isn't it? We're just replicating the entire forest connection in the forest floor with how trees are actually communicating with everything around them.
Yes, we are actually currently rolling out plan for companies and you could say affluent individuals to mimic that network, because it's very simple. In the forest, the trees with more support the trees that need more, so the resources flow to where they're needed. So we have a model for our society, and as best as scientists understand the reason for the flow, I mean, it can just be they care and want to help, right? But that's not really how the academics look at it. They say, well, they understand that if the weaker trees get sick, and COVID is a prime example of this happening, like if people in society become sick due to illness, nobody's immune to these things and it spreads through. So in the forest, basically the health of everything keeps everybody healthy. So
I love that. It's so important. And I mean, our society, our community should be a mirror of that, really.
We've got the model, and they had hundreds of millions of years to perfect it, right? The forest. So there's obviously periods of development. So when we're running sessions for the government, it's like, well, the model's there. Other societies have already adopted it, and if they're left to their own devices, natural woodlands, then it builds resilience into the system. But of course, the majority are, they have interference. We put it that way, but they're certainly much stronger by collaborating and working together than working as individuals. That's the
I think the one plus point in the forest is the trees aren't dealing with egos. So and that is something, as we make this enormous shift on a global scale in terms of human evolution from ego to heart, I really do see that our communities are going to function more naturally like that. I mean, I'm thrilled. We'd love to publicize more of your work and do more of that, because I have a sense that this blueprint that you've created for this model is going to fit very seamlessly with our blueprint for a new sustainable system of health as well.
The main so one of the things that have developed, so I run hundreds of forest bathing sessions, and we've now got training hundreds of people to run the sessions, and it's spreading out globally. But if I compare myself now to when I started, the level of trust that I have in nature is like amplified by many orders of magnitude, to the point now that any session I run, I basically have full confidence that nature will look after the different needs, because of course people will arrive with different needs. So the way that I look at nature is that it always over delivers.
True.
Never disappointed. And so that trust obviously developed from experience and being out in the environment. So what I'd like to see as a society is for all of us to have more trust in nature, and handing back a lot of the control that because we've been basically sort of putting our authority over nature, thinking we know best. But the science shows us that there's all of these millions of interactions between the different species. We're only like at the baby steps of understanding all of these interactions. So if we don't understand the interactions between all the different insects and plants and the birds and the trees, how can we think we can manage that environment appropriately?
I know this is something we can't. I mean, this is something that I get so excited about, because, you know, if you go out there, as you know, with all of your senses alert, I mean, the level of communication that's happening with us as, you know, multifaceted, multidimensional beings is so beautiful and complex, because these trees and, you know, nature is sentient and it's intelligent. And just before we dive into sort of all of the science and everything, which is really important, I've recently come across the fact that the Heart Math Institute in the US are doing this entire program to give a voice to trees. Have you seen that?
No, I do follow their work from time to time. Yeah, because there's a lot of parallels with their heart rate variability, measuring the nervous system that we've done studies on.
Well, I think they launched this in October last year. And as I say, I've literally only just seen it because Melissa Smith in our team, who's got her ear to the ground hugely, has just come across it and sent me the link. But it sounds absolutely amazing. So they're calling it giving a voice to trees, to really be able to assess their sentience and intelligence, not to prove that it exists, I think, but just to help people to understand just what we're living with. And so they're using these sensors to map the electrical life of trees so that they can give people a deeper understanding as to how we're also energetically connected and how trees respond to us. So, I mean, I know that you know this because you're in the forest all the time, but I mean, you know, they know we're coming, they read our energy, they can feel our needs and our requirements. And if we could just take the time to sit down and soak that up, as in your sessions. So I just really get what you're saying about the fact that you've got such trust now that nature will just take care of people's needs because it's feeling them.
Yeah, so the important bit is, yeah, obviously the shift from the head to the heart in that process, but nature speaks to our hearts through all of the senses. So that's why the forest bathing can be very effective, because one person might respond to the colours of the forest, looking at different shades of green or a nice bright blue sky. Other people might feel it in the heart when they're listening to happy birds. Other people, when we're saying, okay, we'll touch a tree and just feel the moss, and it feels like some of the mosses are so soft, they feel like a cat or a rabbit, you're petting them. So it's very tactile interaction, but of course it can evoke quite a range of emotions, because it's like a bit of a flood. So if I go in my head and obviously need to put myself into the heart to lead the session, to try and guide other people to that sense of connection. But a lot of the times, as I sort of transition into my kind of centered, quiet place where I'm trying to lovingly guide people, the flood of emotions I receive as I kind of feel this greater sense of connection to the forest community, it's like really quite a powerful cocktail, because it's like all gratitude, like empathy for what that nature goes through. Might be a little bit of sadness, but generally the main feelings are like a feeling of uplifted feeling, and just reverence, and certainly puts the ego into place, because all of a sudden you feel very small compared to the web of life. But it really brings a warm feeling to the heart. That's how, because there's a lot of love in this process, because that's why my wife and I and the team have dedicated our lives to obviously trying to highlight the importance of these places. And when you're in that sense of connection and you see life much more clearly and you understand the importance of these, obviously the natural environment, it's another whole topic about how we need to look after it. But when you suddenly understand the profound majesty and significance and importance of it as a father for generations to come, and my son's potential children, so yeah, it's quite the hit when you feel it.
It's it is a profound feeling, but also it gives you such a sense of rightness in the world, doesn't it? You feel your place. You know, we are of nature, we're in nature. I know that as a practitioner, it's part of all of my sort of health prescriptions and everything is earthing and grounding, and spending time in nature is a really big part of it. The earthing side. Do you also get people to have their shoes off and be doing, having some time to ground?
Yeah, so it is something that we cover in our training manual for new guides. I mean, it's something that I spent a lot of time researching. So I've reached out to a lot of the world's top experts, on the subject of earthing, and there's the Grounded movie, etc. So of course, so I mean, when we're running sessions for charities and the public, some people may not wish to, but it's basically an option. You can, as long as there's 2 points in contact, you basically get the circuit to flow. So it doesn't necessarily, feet on the ground is generally easier to relax into, but you can do it with 2 hands. And just on the lawn, if the grass is slightly damp, that's like a really good way. And that, because one of the other benefits of being on the beach is when we do have our bare feet on the sand or we're in the sea, because we are expanding. We're in the process of launching a new organisation that will bring in blue space to our university.
Wonderful.
Research as well.
Tell us a bit more about that, please.
Well, I won't give you the full title. It's not 100% confirmed, but basically it's going to be a global institute. And we're looking for, I guess, founders and finance, private. We're going to need to do private finance on it, because it seems the only logical path to dramatically increasing our impact to be more in line with the urgency that we all feel in our hearts to make a difference. It does feel urgent. I mean, if you just looked at it from a biodiversity loss perspective, obviously there's some kind of race effectively happening where we have to rush and protect us what we've got left, because so much has already been lost. So my wife and I are feeling it very tangibly. I can feel it now. It's urgent. So what can we do to dramatically increase the amount of people we're getting out into these places, helping them understand that they're so critical to our, well, it's physical, mental, emotional, and beyond. So absolutely critical on that level. But we also don't protect what we don't know. I could talk, yes. So I think, I don't know if we discussed oxytocin, the love hormone, in the last interview.
I think we might have touched on it, but let's talk about it again, because everybody needs a good old dose. Yeah, one of mine too.
Because we did an interview for BBC Planet Earth. It was for the online version, and we were investigating the sense of touch and what happens when we touch. So I looked at some papers and I realized that when we're holding people's hands and we're hugging people, that tactile response releases oxytocin into the brain. So when we have a children, family, maybe it's a new partner and we're dating and we're holding hands, it is increasing that bond on a chemical level, which is why obviously, yeah, hugs and holding hands and kissing and things feel so good. So there's this chemical reaction. But I realized that the same thing would be happening when we're touching nature. So if you're not going into nature, you've hardly ever been into nature, you don't know nature, you don't tend to protect what you don't know or you don't care about. We protect what we care about. So by getting people into nature, touching nature, they're going to be getting this oxytocin response. Literally, a forest bathing session is designed to get people to love nature more. Mm-hmm. And as that love develops very quickly, I think you'll find in the vast majority of us, because we've measured it, how can I help is the thing that comes to our mind. And that's hopefully where we can inspire people to follow their hearts, because we've all got obviously different unique abilities and qualities and contributions that we can make. So we're hoping to fire up as many people as possible to contribute in the way that feels best to them.
Well, honestly, count us in to get this message out. One of my deepest pains at the moment is having to do my drive to work from where I live, further up the A3, mm-hmm. across what I have termed the killing fields, of where they're doing this massive road widening. I don't know if you've seen what's happening at junction 10 on the M25.
I haven't seen it. I've heard a lot of people talking about it though.
It is the destruction. I mean, I feel physical grief every time I have to drive mm-hmm. past it all, because it must be running into the thousands of how many trees have been decimated, and that ancient forest and all that habitat that was lining the road there is gone. It's all gone, but in a very brutal way as well. You can just feel that, and I mean, I'm so tuned into the pain of it all. It's uncomfortable. Gaia is hurting, you know, and I agree with you. The more people can actually experience what nature is trying to be there for us, the more people will step up to the plate and not want to see things like this happen.
Yes. Yeah, it's a reminder, coming into a sense of connection. And it's definitely a great way for the vast majority of us to center as well, because mm-hmm. We've been running. So what we've just finished a 6-week program that was funded by Surrey County Council and the AONB. So what we did was we set it up sessions at Newlands Corner with 3 charities. So Amber, who are near Dorking, so they look after people that have been homeless. And there was Big Leaf, that's a refugee charity, and Catalyst, which looks after people that have got mental health concerns. So we had the 3 charities for 6 weeks at Newlands Corner, and the AONB, Surrey Hills AONB, paid for electric minibuses.
Wonderful.
Part of what we were told by the charities is, look, if you want to get people up to forest, you're going to need to provide transport, because many of them don't have cars. So after 3 years of talking to Guildford Council, we finally got access to the Hive and their fleet of electric minibuses. Because, of course, the other thing that we wanted to avoid was taking these diesel minibuses up to Newlands Corner and the fumes going into the environment. So it was like a dream come true. So I went up to the launch of it, and they're just so quiet. They're like, we in minibus, people get off, we out. I was like, so we're picking them up and dropping them off at Guildford Station, and then another one went to basically where some of the refugees were staying, and the Amber brought their own group. But the feedback from the people attending, so it's like every step along the path, confidence grows that this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. It's because you want to do something with your life that's relevant, useful, and helpful, right? There's no point saying, okay, well, nature's good for health, and then a lot of people go, I'm not sure about that. But that's not the type of feedback that comes from these sessions. So Amber, there was a lot of young guys that have been homeless, and there's obviously been a lot going on for them. And in between the sessions, they were basically talking a lot about the forest bathing. That's the feedback from the charity, because they were so fired up by. One of them said, "Oh, it just felt like I released so much into the earth."
Oh, that's
I
beautiful.
don't know if he was doing grounding or earthing.
Yeah.
I didn't get that piece of feedback, but it certainly felt like he let go. Because yeah, sometimes, I mean, I've had that sense where it can be like the earth could be a bit of a container if we wanted to perhaps let go of something that's really challenging. So that was his report, and obviously a very strong feeling. But the enthusiasm that they were having was, and of course the charities like absolutely delighted, and they were very enthusiastic group. There was some girls as well, but they actually, it was a very interesting dynamic with the refugee charity, who were, I'd say, quite a lot more nervous about attending for a variety of reasons. But it was like the enthusiasm of the Amber group actually helped the Big Leaf group ease into it, relax into it. So that was like a surprising outcome from this experiment, if you want to put it that way. And like the feedback from the Big Leaf group was like, yeah, mothers that have been separated from children, obviously constantly thinking about that separation. So the forest bathing was able to just give a little bit of a sort of sense of relief, or perhaps settled the mum.
Nurturing as well.
Yes. Yeah, nurturing's an important word. Many of us need more nurturing. Many don't get. I mean, I've had people turn up and you understand that there hasn't been any nurturing for a very long time. So we're training people to be nurturing, the guide team, but nature is also very nurturing, and that's part of what we would hope people get.
I think so. I mean, just going back to your, our discussion on oxytocin. I mean, obviously, they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but honestly, a 10 or 20-second hug is going to do so much for us, isn't it? Because the release of oxytocin, and it comes back to that nurturing. And I know there are so many people who don't get any touch on a regular basis. And I think that's where the forest bathing can really help, because nature will be able to touch you and you will feel that nurturing, because it's such a big part of who we are as human beings. We really need that.
I mean, I've lost count of the amount of reports of people, because on the forest bathing, we also step through the senses, but a lot of people think, oh, forest bathing, I'm going to get to hug a tree. That's people think. So you don't want to disappoint people if that's what their intention was. So I always give them the option. It's like, okay, well, go and have a look at a tree, and if you wanted to have a hug with a tree, now's your opportunity. And the amount of people that have been like, the sort of average reaction to hugging a tree for the first time for many, it's like, well, thank you for giving me permission. It's like, well, actually, we don't need permission. Anyone can go and hug you could ask the tree for permission, maybe first. You don't need to ask another person for permission necessarily. But the main feedback is, it felt like a person, or it felt alive. It's like, because so we might have this intellectual concept of a tree feeling more like a concrete wall or something, where there's nothing like going on and it's an inanimate object. But when people either put their hands on or hug a tree, and of course there is a lot of energy movement in a tree. Like in the spring, some of the trees are moving thousands of liters a day up the trunk. So there's obviously energy movement of various types happening. And if you're sensitive, as many of us are, then you can obviously start to sense these things. You can hear pops and crackles if you use a stethoscope or something a bit more powerful. I've got the stethoscope, doctor approach. So yeah, generally people are overwhelmingly surprised by how much they get out of it. And of course, if you are feeling like it, you're actually in contact with another individual rather than an inanimate object, then that could be that sense of connection, nurturing. I mean, we were doing university studies, and I had one lady run up to me at the end and said, oh, I didn't want to say in front of the group, like with all the university there, but he said, that tree spoke to me. Okay.
Yeah.
We've had plenty of that over the years as well.
Absolutely. I know people are very disparaging about tree huggers, but card carrying 30 odd years now. So it's
we did the science on that one. We because we had the heart rate monitors on people. So when what the science shows us is that when we come into proximity to a tree, don't have to hug it, but if you just come into proximity of a tree and you're mindful and present and paying attention to the tree, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation response. So yeah, the first study we did with the University of Derby proved all the hippies right. Did that one quite quickly.
No, tick that box.
Yeah, that's done. Yeah, definitely a good boy to hug a tree. Yeah, the nervous system appreciates it.
And you've got new science out now as well, haven't you? Have you just finished a study?
We have, yes.
Can you talk about it?
Yes, I'm delighted to. So it was 3 years of development because we're in the process of replicating the Japanese, South Korean science. I mean, for all of our benefits, but the NHS needs the replication. Simple as that. That's what they use. Science on the other side of the planet. There's too many variables, so it's completely understandable. So it's like, okay, well, we're replicating for you then. So it's quite a big project. So it took us 3 years to get the University of Sheffield out into the forest. And because one of the most interesting arms, and really why we were dedicated to bringing the whole concept to the UK, was the connection between the air chemistry and the changes in the immune system, beneficial changes. So we've got Professor Lee in Japan, who was actually our original source of inspiration. He's now our scientific advisor because we're able to do more. We're able to do clinical research here and research with children following university ethics, whereas it's almost impossible for him to do that in Japan.
Okay.
So we've teamed up with our original source of inspiration. The press release is on our website. And yeah, so we were trying to get funding for blood research, but of course it was horrendously expensive. Like the quotes we were getting was £130,000, etc. But then when I spoke to Professor Lee, he said, no. Don't do the blood research first. If you want to measure the changes in the blood and look for positive changes, the first thing you need to do is confirm that the chemicals are present in the air that we know lead to the changes. Because if the chemicals are present and people's exposure time is long enough, then it's a chemical reaction.
Yes, and it's gonna happen. Yeah,
it's gonna happen if you're there for long enough and breathing, breathing nice and deeply, ideally. So we've got the University of Sheffield out, and so there was a lot of discussions about the woodland. I was like, we must get to as intact a spot as possible. What we want to measure as natural woodland as possible, not a plantation as a first case, because we want to know what Mother Nature's doing, not what humans are doing in plantation woodland, which may have some benefits. We get to that bit. So we got them out into a semi-ancient natural woodland just outside Sheffield. So you can see the paper linked up on our website. It's gas chromatography and mass spectrometry research. So they're obviously measuring the air chemistry. And the way that they decided to do it, for a variety of reasons, was they're going to measure it for 2 hours to see what concentration of the chemicals they get, because our sessions run for 2 hours.
What? Oh, okay, wonderful. Yes.
So do they absorb enough of the chemicals into the equipment in 2 hours to measure it and then say, well, potentially there would be a health benefit to this, but we obviously need to now measure, is that health benefit happening? So you can see it all in the paper. Basically, they identified a much more complex chemical atmosphere. The control was the university garden. Probably not a surprise to most people that if you've got this, because woodlands are incredibly complex environments.
Very.
There's lots of reasons to take people into forests, but a sensory experience, there's a huge amount going on there compared to, like, obviously if you're on a beach or something, you've got sound of waves, but there's not all of the kind of colours and all of this sort of stuff going on. So it's probably not a surprise where you've got a much greater mix of flora and fauna, then you've also in parallel got this much greater mix of chemical activity. So they confirmed that compared to the control environment. The good news was that we managed to confirm that there are known chemicals in UK woodland that have health benefits. So step one is like, okay, so we've got some of these chemicals here as well as the other side of the planet. So the next arm of the research would be measuring participants, and we're talking to some medical departments. I've got the cost of the blood research potentially down to around 40,000 from 130, but we're still in the process of looking for about 40,000 to help.
Do you know what markers they're going to be looking at in blood?
Well, the beauty is that if we're able to obviously take bloods, then the equipment could, like some of the equipment at one university, could measure up to 12 different areas of blood in one.
But I just wonder whether they're, which bits of it are they measuring? Cytokines? Are they measuring? I don't know whether you've got that far yet.
Yeah, so all of that's what's been done in Japan and South Korea and other places. So the one that generally a lot of people talk about is the NK cells, the natural killer cells.
Yes.
System, which are a bit like the police in the immune system. They will jump.
Natural killer cells.
Yeah, if something's out of place, they jump to activity and go and investigate and see what they can do about it. And so the videos on our website, Professor Lee, where you've got the graphs of how much these cells increase after exposure in the forest. So it leads to obviously a much more robust immune response. And it doesn't take long to start thinking about, well, where are the applications in society for that with people who've got a compromised immune system?
But it's all of us, because if we want to build resilience in our immune systems as well. Yeah. And I know when we spoke the last time, we spoke quite a bit about repopulating our microbiomes through breathing in all of the microbial mass. But yes, I mean, these other chemicals are just a huge benefit. I mean, it's just overwhelming. It's kind of like, just get out into nature, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the funders need obviously evidence of the impact. Yes. I mean, that's the way it's gone, and I can completely understand that, because you want to make sure you're not wasting your money. But we're certainly one of the strongest on the evidence base, which is why a number of the people that listened to our last interview, the NHS gets in touch. They say, because you're evidence based. Yes. And we're saying, yes. I mean, constantly, like, I've got a number of studies in development. I mean, the university's interested. We're firing up as fast as we can. We've been delighted to get in contact with Bournemouth, and they have got a wide range of physiological equipment, up to potentially including fMRI, that we might be able to do some studies. So there's a lot about brainwave activity. Yes. I mean, I'm interested in all of it, but the brainwave activity, if you can understand that area more, and you obviously understand the type of activity, if people are really struggling, like with rumination and replaying thoughts, and you can measure moving from that type of activity that can be, of course, incredibly upsetting and painful for people. So if we've got a way of moving people away from that, which is what a lot of people during the forest bathing sessions say, you stop me thinking about things that are upsetting me, or feel much calmer now. But of course, it's nice to understand it on that level of the brainwave activity. So that one I'm very keen to fire up.
That would be amazing, because, in talking about adaptive ranges, we should have this, ability to be moving between parasympathetic and sympathetic, rest and digest and fight and flight. But the whole of technology in our world is just set up to be triggering us all the time. The dopamine hits just come one after another. So, you've got the extremes, obviously, of anxiety and depression and all that, that side of it. But just the bit in the middle is, where do we get some space and some relaxation? How do we just switch into that more restful mode? I mean, I think the brainwave side of it sounds really exciting. If you can get to that research,
we will. The only question,
we know it happens, though, don't we?
The only question is when. I mean, because we get a big global perspective on the interest. I mean, I've got universities across the planet. We've got Taiwan coming over. We've already had South Korea universities. We've got Thailand, Of course, we've tied up with Japan. We've got a lot of interest coming in from the States and across Europe. So I get a big perspective on the growth of the interest and all of the activity from the academics. I mean, we're in the process of setting up a huge international research, basically collaboration, because nature's so nuanced. There might be things that we don't necessarily pick up on in England or in the UK, but they might be much more obvious in a Thai forest.
Yes.
And what I've learned from running forest bathing sessions across England is that some things are more obvious in one place than another forest. But once I've become aware of them in that forest, I then see them where I was all the time. Yeah, so so it kind of brings something to your attention. So when we're talking about research and understanding, I mean, in Thailand, they're very interested in what we've been doing with social prescribing because of the socio-economic issues there. So they're very keen to bring nature into the mix of helping people. So that's an offshoot of what we're like. You'd never come up with that at the start of this journey, would you? It's like, oh, the Thai, one of the leading universities in Thailand is going to get in touch to say, well, you're managing to use nature to help some of those most in need in society. We've got a lot of people in need in our society. What help us help them? So
but that's the global community at work as well, isn't it? It's this, it's this huge network, the nature network. Gary, I'm so thrilled because I know that you are helping an awful lot of people, and we have been very lucky to experience a session with Philippa, who's one of your trained professionals, which was absolutely amazing in the Surrey Hills here. So I'd love to do more of it. I mean, I think that it should be in everybody's diary and everybody's calendar to be putting in a session, and with kids. Can you talk a bit about how kids respond?
Yeah, well, as a father of a nearly 3-year-old, I can certainly talk at length about that. On the public paid sessions, the age range we've helped now is 6 months to 90 plus. We had someone rock up with a baby. I was like, okay, well, normally the average sessions are 18 plus, the paid ones we have on Eventbrite. But if people want us to run sessions for younger children, we've got a lot of guides in our team that are professionally qualified and DBS cleared. So we do kids sessions. I've been involved with like 7 to 9-year-olds. But yeah, so even with the younger ones, I mean, one of the most amazing kids sessions was a charity that brings children over that were impacted by the Chernobyl. So they were bringing the kids over to England to take them out into nature with the hope of boosting their well-being, because they're normally like in a tower block or something in a city with no or very little exposure. And by the end, so they were sort of, I think they were 7 to 9. And by the end of the session, they did move in, because it's moving into the stillness and quiet. I mean, that's when people are coming into a sense of connection, because you're not hearing them verbally, but they're probably hearing quite a lot of what's actually going on so they're listening more than talking. So we got them into the calm place for little wind with the younger children. Little windows. Not perhaps not for quite so sustained as the older ones, but at the end of the session, they shouted across the car park, my wife and I, "Thank you, Gary and Olga." And like the love and appreciation that came out of my heart just went boom. It was like it exploded. Like, that was so worth doing. And our little one, I mean, just the other day, he thinks everything flying at this point is big. I've now got to the point where I'm trying to say, okay, that's fly, that's hover fly. Right? But he wanted to go to where things were flying. And of course, he's normally circling me. Vroom, 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 vroom. But when we went to where the insects were flying, stop, attention. And there was probably at least 2 or 3 minutes of him, like he's present. He's present with
really present.
And I'm showing him, okay, there's something there. Very calm. And a lot of the times when we've done that, the nature of the relationship completely transforms. So it might be a bit combative prior.
Yeah.
After, lot more loving and hug. And the only way I can save him, because of course kids naturally is like, oh, ant, tread on ant, splat. So he connects baby to taking care of and not hurting. So at this point, everything is baby. So he's not to be killing anything. No. Trying to ingrain right from the start the sanctity of life, and of course how critical everything is at this point. The web of life.
But you know, that just illustrates, because we started this conversation and you've mentioned loss of diversity. We're in the sixth mass extinction. The species loss is just exponential, and insects are one of them. And so you talk about going to the place where there's insects, but I mean there's so many places now that you go and there's no insects. And I think about my childhood and how they were just clouds of them all over the place, and you don't see that anymore.
No.
But look at the effect on your child. I mean, this is a call to action for each and every one of us, really.
The insects in the forest bring the people in our sessions a lot of joy. The common one is the hoverfly. I mean, they come up really close to you. The beam of sunlight coming through the tree canopy, and so it's either like hoverflies in this sunlight coming through, which looks rather angelic, or like these circles of insects. And people, have had a lot of meaningful experiences from connections to insects. And when you look at some of the beetles and these little flies and things, the range of colors, I mean, they start to look like artworks. It's like such precious beauty that's magnificent. And of course a lot of people aren't even aware of the existence, and then the species could be snuffed out like that. So yes, part of the messaging is that let's look at what we've got, let's get to know what we've got, appreciate its significance. And of course, the insects is part of that tree of life, where they obviously fed on by the other birds and the animals, etc., etc.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, everything in nature is sentient as well. And I had a reminder of this recently. P. Horsley, who is one of the most famous animal communicators, she's based here in the UK, but she's really world renowned. And she was talking on a podcast recently about how it was a real, wake up moment for her when she realized that, the insects are communicating, and she had communication with a fly, and she literally couldn't believe it. And she, got this fly to do all kinds of circuits and things just to prove that it really was picking her up. And but I mean, of course, it stands to reason everything is sentient. And so when we're wiping out all these species, we're taking actions that are wiping out sentient beings, and we do need to be so much more aware of that.
Well, I certainly couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the recent articles on the BBC was about scientists studying the emotional range of bees. Because the thing is, of course, with science is like, if you intuitively look at insects and animals and birds, and particularly if you pay attention to them when they're at play, you get to see a range of emotions, and like with jackdaws having fun in the wind or whatever it might be. So you can see the parallels with us as animals. But it's obviously, so we find it harder to then see those same things in insects. It's still obviously slow work with birds and animals on some fronts. So so when you got research saying, well, we can confirm that happy bees, like when there's the pollen, with certain amounts of pollen and things they were measuring. So that was a good article for people to look at. And there was also, because we touched on tree sentience, and the general sentience of life. Stefano Mancuso is another scientist we follow in Italy. So he's at the forefront of plant consciousness, which of course would include tree sentience and measuring emotional responses. So he was on, I think he was in The Guardian recently, because I think he's got a new book out. So there are a lot of amazing people doing incredible work, because of course it's this great body of work that is being put together. The beauty of science, like if it's forest bathing research, okay, well, we generally know forest bathing is good for you and everyone should be doing it. But then when you start breaking it down, understanding exactly what's going on, then that obviously allows you to use forest bathing to help in specific instances. So when you were talking about forest bathing as a whole, generally in Japan, it's used for preventative healthcare. Get out into nature when you feel a bit overwhelmed or it's difficult or you just want to have a break. That's the main message that all of us really need to take on board. Stop the problems building up or getting worse, because if you then start talking about treatment, that can be a lot longer path for all of us once the problem's got like severe or really overwhelming. But what we're working on with Professor Lee is, so it's rehabilitation medicine. So in the case of like cancer patients, could forest bathing be part of the recovery process and help people to deal with some of the emotional impact of what they've been through? That seems quite a logical one, and we've been talking to some hospitals about that particular application. So so where can it be used, nature for rehabilitation, and where can we use nature for treatment? So in the instance of blood pressure, they have options in Japan, the tablet or the referral to the clinic and a forest bathing session, and then measure the blood pressure afterwards to make sure it's helped. So those are the three arms that we're working on. That's what our new organisation will be pushing forwards as quickly as possible, because there's a lot of clinical work that we need to do. And just to come back to the gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, so we identified a number of chemicals that are basically associated with potential health benefits to people. We also identified a number of chemicals basically in the family of potential beneficial effects, but chemicals that very few people on the planet have researched. So we solved what happens with the research is, so we solved one mystery that was really bugging.
You open another massive
Pandora's
Pandora's
box. And we open another, because when you start breaking into, okay, so what do we know about the properties of these different chemicals and the potential positive effects? Again, you end up the other side of the planet a lot of the time. So the majority of research that I can find on like the leading research websites is it's a lot of Chinese research when you're starting to look at chemicals and potential properties of chemicals, and when I'm obviously looking at the chemicals that have known health benefits for people. So one mystery solved, another three created. So it's like, I think I'm going to be at this for a little while.
You know, in the ANH office here, we have a saying that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's science to a T. Science can only go so far, but science's limitations are, are what it knows. So we need all these pathfinders to be able to come in and be opening the doors. So Gary, the Pandora's box you've just flown open, is going to be the next major scientific pathway, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I've lost track of the amount of academics we're in contact with. Always happy to hear from more. Anyone, with that passion. I mean, some people at a university went up to the events in London that was obviously about the environment the other weekend, and then the next thing I know, we're getting an email from some academics saying, well actually, we really get it. Where's our piece of the puzzle to contribute to the solution? So it's nice to see that kind of circuit. So fired up some more people to get the data that's desperately needed. But I hope, I think the main thing I'd say is that please have more confidence in nature's ability to give you something when you at any point. But the message coming through from the people we train and the people on the sessions is that in our darkest time, most troubling times, most challenging times, sometimes getting out into nature is the only thing that people have found to help them.
And that's true. And of course, we've talked an awful lot about health and healing and disease prevention. And the one thing we haven't touched on is how nature and forest bathing can be useful in business as well. So I don't know if you've ever come across the work of Giles Hutchins, who is he's written a series of books. Future Fit is one of his most famous ones, and he is a leader in the regenerative leadership and regenerative business space. But he does all his work outside, because obviously you know that it just triggers problem solving, creativity, that you get with all the calming of your brain waves and everything. Your higher executive function has space to run, and the monkey mind calms down. So I just wanted to put that in, that you know, the business side of it is absolutely huge.
Yeah, well, actually, you have triggered a memory. So quite a common conversation I have with healthcare workers at this point is around how could they use green space easily. So the main thing that I say to people is you will find that you probably have a different quality of conversation when you're in nature. Mm-hmm. Certainly for me, much easier for me to speak from my heart.
Yes.
When I'm in nature, so it can open up different dynamics in a conversation. So yeah, I mean, if you're sitting on the grass and looking at some trees or the sky and feeling slightly more relaxed, if it's some kind of challenging conversation in a work environment, maybe people are able to drop their guards or be a bit more honest and open with each other to resolve difference. I mean, because we run a lot of corporate sessions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're getting to the point of activations for different organisations and things, and we teamed up with some very ethical organisations whose work we appreciate. So we do have that feedback from the corporates. One of the nicest ones was, so we're obviously in this office and we know each other and we're communicating via email and the phone. That's what's normally going on. After the forest bathing, the team were much more inclined to go up to their colleagues and talk in person, which opens up conversations in a completely different way, because email can be limited, certainly limiting on an emotional level. Email, because if somebody sends something and you read it in a different voice in your head, you can feel like quite emotional about it, but they never send it like that. So that's why it's always best to hear someone's voice tone. So there are always, of course, benefits to us actually talking in person rather than over the phone or email. So that's what the organisation was saying, that it brought the teams together and actually is allowing them to work much more closely and in a more of a human contact way, probably with more empathy in the mix somewhere.
So it's just so important, especially as so many people are still remote working and haven't been brought back into. And I think some companies, they're never going to have their workers back in the body of the fold again. So I'd really encourage, business owners out there to think about taking their teams into nature to do team building and everything, and to do forest bathing, because especially if you've got a lot of remote workers, so much healthier than having a knees up in the pub, isn't it?
Yeah, I've never had any organisation regret coming into the forest with us. The main thing I'd say to anyone working in HR or team leading positions that's thinking about a team away day. So we basically were working with a household name global tech company, and the person in the HR department said, look, if we don't do something for the people that's working for us, what's average happening is they come into the office, which of course can be challenging or stressful. They go home, they've got the house, they've got the kids, they're back in the office, and it's just this loop of stress. So if they want to help their staff, and of course there is a productivity and sickness angle on that, HR managers in terms of reducing costs, but it has to happen in work hours, because it's very difficult, if not impossible, for a lot of people to make that time in their personal life. Mm-hmm. So that's why more organisations say, okay, well, yes, there's obviously, it's just a good thing to do on all levels and the company's bottom line. And of course, these things can be tax deductible, etc. So it definitely needs to be more of a focus. I mean, we are talking to the House of Commons and House of Lords about all of these things, but just balance. But coming back into balance, it all got a bit hectic for the vast majority of us. We know that. So just dialing it down from time to time when we can, and definitely so we need everybody supporting that. And of course that goes for the companies and organizations and charities and the NHS, etc.
Everything. I think that nature is the ultimate antidote to overwhelm.
Seems to be. I'm not aware of a better one at this point. It is what's changed my life and my wife's. We are using it as regularly as possible. We've heard, I mean, we don't know how many people we've had at the sessions now. It's probably 20,000 people plus that have been at forest bathing sessions. It might be easily way above that. But the survey has been done. It means a lot to all of us when we give it a chance getting out into nature. We need nature and nature needs us to care. So yeah, it's that symbiotic relationship, and it's that point in time.
I think you've just neatly tied up our interview session with a beautiful nature bow, haven't you? That is really so important. Nature really does need us, and we need nature. It's a symbiotic relationship. There's nothing more to be said, really.
No,
but
I'll leave it there then.
Are you going to leave it there? I am going to say to you though, do you have any last words that you would like to say? Obviously, we are going to be linking to all the things that we've talked about, and all of the details of the institute, with the Forest Bathing Institute, will be there so that you can people can find their way to you very quickly. But anything else you'd like to just add before we close?
Well, if you care and it's relevant, get in touch. Get a range of inquiries. We're in the process of putting this new organisation together, so it doesn't matter where you are. I've got the list building of people that want to make these things happen. So whether it's people they care for in the healthcare professions, people at companies, if you're in research, government circles, obviously the funding's a huge piece of the puzzle that we have to work on and because what our aim of our work is to empower and educate people. It's not about becoming reliant on the Forest Bathing Institute or our guys. We give people a lot of take home, and we're basically trying to get the ripples going out. So the people that come on our sessions, it's like, okay, do a few of these simple things with the kids, grandkids. A lot of the time people that come on our sessions end up helping parents and siblings just in a simple way with some of what we shared with them. And there's a lot of work to do. So if you feel called to get involved, do, and never forget that each passionate person that makes a contribution is a huge thing. We shouldn't undervalue our individual contributions. And when you make that step on the path to make a contribution, you're more likely to be surprised at where you end up if you follow your heart.
That's so true. I think, for anybody who thinks, what can I do? I'm just one person.
Never
if you have an open heart and you have kindness in you, that incredible ripple and that light is going out and changing everything around you. Just like when you throw a pebble into the water, isn't it? And it's the same with the people going out there taking the message of nature and the forest bathing.
Yeah. Pete, working with people,
we're stronger.
We're all incredible with amazing gifts and such great capabilities. So nobody should think of themselves as a small individual. But just find the starting step. Don't try and find like how you get to that end goal. Just make the first step in a manageable way for you along the path, and then it should hopefully unfold. Otherwise, reach out to other people that's what we've done. Reach out to other people that are doing what you want to do, and you'll be surprised. Authors and people at universities will reply, so you'll find help if you ask.
And if you're searching for an answer to anything, go sit in the forest and sit in the forest, and it will come. You will be helped.
Yes. Yeah, I always refer back to the Buddha's awakening, because of course, there's a lot of mindfulness and meditation and yoga, and so there's been a lot of this indoors. But where was the Buddha when he had his awakening? Under a tree.
Under a tree.
All began under a tree. So we're just putting it all back together at this point. And so so a lot of the Zen proverbs and parables, when the meditation or yoga teachers are trying to help somebody understand mindfulness and meditation, those stories are in nature. Listen to a stream, listen to the sound of a bird, stare at a flower. It's that you find yourself in the simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so stripping it back to that simple way, and it feels nice and a relief.
Oh, absolutely. I can just feel it coming over me now. Gary, I love talking to you. We are huge supporters. We put out all of all of your work. We're going to continue to do that. Please, would you keep us updated on what's happening? Thank you to Philippa, who facilitated a beautiful session for us, and we're going to be taking our wider team on another forest bathing very soon.
We're always available, and well, thank you. It's lovely to speak to you again, and we will no doubt be in touch.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Gary.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye for now.